agreed to come here and give a talk about his experience building that receiver, and more generally, more importantly, the fact of staying true to your data. Right? So as engineers, we often want the data to look the way we want it because we designed that system. But if you're a scientist, you have to let the data speak to you and let it reveal the truth rather than trying to have your own bias when you're looking at the data. So it's going to talk about that. I'll do in 2 minutes. It's just something up to the rest. So I think he wants you to be engaged. It's not a lecture. He doesn't want to just talk about his own experience. So if you have questions, anything, it doesn't have to be about the science itself. It can be about anything. He has had a very long career. Feel free to ask them. So he worked at Bell Labs for a long time, and that's where he did this research to win the Nobel Prize. He's now at NEA. He's a venture partner at NEA and does clean tech investments. So he's looked a lot at energy investments in recent years. Okay? While we wait, any questions about this?
What you went through in the past few slides was the first form.
And I understand that many of you are engineers, that some of you are professional, going all the way from freshmen to seniors. And as far as I can judge, that part of the reason you come listen to my lecture is, how can I get rich? So, the first lesson is how you show up. Okay? And so I thought just a little bit, which is, I'm very important, but I don't let it bother me. Okay? That takes care of this thing. This is the prop. I had it in here this morning for a different reason, but I figured it would be a good one for this afternoon in our venture capital fund. So, what? So we're going to have to. Yeah, why don't you put that somewhere else so I can put down my little notes and see. Okay. What I hope is, and I've got something like a half an hour, is that right?
Yeah, we have to talk about this.
Okay, just a little bit over half an hour. And so, the question is, why am I here today? And it's a lot of different things. One of them ultimately will be try to give you some help with your careers, both academic and the world which you follows that, and how those two mesh together. In order to do that, I thought I'd talk a little bit about myself first, introduce myself a little bit to you, and then, having gotten through all that, then I will go and go more deeply into some of the things that will come from your questions. Because most of what I expect to do today is to answer your questions. That is really the reason I'm here, and I hope that all of you will learn that particular scripture. One of the things I said for years when I was giving talks, more than I am now, in fact, I use that in Stockholm, as a matter of fact. I use that line, which is children ask enormous amounts of questions. Why is it dark at night? Why does the car smoke when it's cold? A few others. One of them was, why do you smoke cigarettes? But they actually took that out of the film. And so, but I did, the answer was, we parents breathe a sigh of relief when our children get old enough to stop asking so many questions. And the trick is to get over that stage. The trick is to really be a good pain, a positive person in that way. And one of the things I've done with my life is to ask more questions than most people. And that has gotten me from where I was a mid-level engineering student to a lot of other good things that came out of it. So let's get started. Now, let me say a few few words about myself. And the first one was, hey, here's the guy that discovered the origin of the universe. It's a hard thing, that is a hard thing to do. But that's not to say it was all about saying, hey, I was there, and everybody else said, hey, that's great. A lot of people wanted credit for it as well. It's not enough to be the first person to discover the origin of the universe. It's also the person also needs the credit for that. And so, there were several people, a lot of people, various times, realized that when you look out in space, space is not cold. You would expect it to be cold because you got these stars warming it up. And there may be 10 billion stars in the Milky Way, but there's not enough warmth from them to warm the place up a lot. In fact, it's a small fraction of 3 degrees inside the galaxy. And one of the first things I wanted to do was measure our galaxy from the inside. I really said, hey, this is the galaxy we live in. There are 100 billion suns in it. We happen to live on one of them. Are we the only one? How could we connect to others? What is going on with this galaxy? And so the first thing I wanted to figure, and so one of the things I wanted to see was, and since I'm a radio astronomer, I try to measure the warmth using a radio receiver. I wanted to see if I could measure our galaxy from the inside. I can't measure it from the outside. It would take much too long to get up there, and by the time I got that, I'd be pretty old. So what I did instead then was to decide, well, the first thing I wanted to do was try to measure the noise from our galaxy. And there was a nuisance about this because we had this bothersome additional amount of noise, which didn't seem to be coming from the galaxy, because you went from the pole of the galaxy, which is the biggest part, which is sort of it's a flat pancake, where it's the thinnest, and go all the way out to the edge, you got maybe a degree and a half in the biggest place. But if we started looking at the sky, we find that there are lots of things which are out of place. And I'll tell you about some of them. There were people who had built very low noise antennas. This one guy built a very low noise antenna, which meant that unlike most radio telescopes, you have an antenna like this, right? And this is the focus. So you have radiation that comes out here, it comes out there. What most people do, actually, is you can't really have a good receiver out here, so they may build a little reflector, and then the other part comes in here, and it all comes into this bucket. Okay. So the question is, when you start measuring this, how much noise is coming, say, from out here, how much stuff is bouncing a few times, and so forth. So you have to be very careful about this kind of antenna. So a much better antenna would be just to have a horn like that. But you can't point one up the sky, it'd be much too big. So what they ended up doing was building one sideways. And this is a favorite. This is one of the, and the antenna still lives in New Jersey. You can go visit it if you want. And this antenna had all the radiation come in here, and radiation which comes in other ways bounces back out. Nothing can come in here, and so forth. So this antenna, unlike most antennas, only sees the sky. So the first people built one of these things said, hey, we've built this great antenna. And what you do is, you want to see no noise. What do you compare it against is another source of noise whose temperature is known, because everything has a temperature associated with it. And so, the easiest thing to use is you could use liquid nitrogen, which is pretty cold, 77 degrees Kelvin, or liquid helium, which could be 4 degrees if you just need a room temperature. If you pump it, it's kind of 1 degree or something, 1/2. And so you can always put something like that here. And but even so, there was extra noise coming from here. Now, loss thing adds to warmth. And the way to explain that is rather simple. If this stuff absorbs here, absorbs here, I'm no longer seeing the sky, I'm just seeing whatever this is. It's the same thing as if you had a lens looking up at the sky. If this lens is clean, you don't see anything. But if the lens gets dirty, then you see the noise from the dirt. And so the same thing would happen in this antenna. So the famous business of the pigeons who came in this antenna to coat it did actually contribute a very small amount of noise. There's other things, but there's a lot of little things like that. But the main part of it was really the science, figuring out what to do. And noticing what was important and what wasn't. And the other people who did this weren't that lucky. So the first people to use an antenna like this, two guys who built a very low noise amplifier and a small antenna like that, looking outside of the sky. And guess what? They found that the noise temperature of their machine, which they understood, plus the noise temperature of the sky and the noise temperature of the atmosphere, they ended up with about 2.5 degrees, 3 degrees actually, 3 degrees more than they expected. They couldn't publish their result. So two guys are working. So the antenna guy, because it was the antenna, I think, figured he knew the antenna better than the receiver guy. So the antenna guy took 1 degree, and the receiver guy took 2 degrees. They added those into their numbers, and then it came out even. They were done. One guy's name was Hogg, the other guy's name was Cole. But that was the end of it. Because they didn't have the curiosity, the persistence to see that maybe there was something there. So that was Hogg and Scoville. Another person who was much better actually worked with this big antenna. There was a small version of this 20-foot horn. 20 feet meaning the size of the aperture. That was a small antenna. The larger antenna was run by a guy who looked over the sky, was very, very careful. And he also understood this, and he was left with 3 degrees, which he also couldn't explain. But he didn't have a way of measuring it, so he shrugged his shoulders. At least he didn't bury it. He also didn't publish it, but he didn't bury it. And it kept going. More people. There were others, and I'm not going to go into the details because it doesn't really matter. But there was somebody else. Gerhard Hertzberg, who wrote a book. Hertzberg is this guy's name. I think we have to see here, yes. And this is a book on atomic, I think it's a book on molecular spectroscopy. And he makes all these spectroscopic measurements. And he makes the measurements of the sky. And he noticed that in one place in the sky, he could find absorption from 2 different levels of a molecule. Which is a surprise, because the upper level shouldn't have been populated. It was populated, and the lower level was populated. And the difference between the two, these 2 low levels, turned out to be, according to Hertzberg, about 2.3 degrees or some such thing. He left it in his book. And interestingly enough, I read Hertzberg, and I didn't connect it to the stuff I was looking for here. Because we all have watertight compartments in our minds. So, but then a bunch of other people, and all of this, but ultimately what we were looking for was finally to understand our cosmos. We have a sun, which is 1 part of 10 billion suns in the Milky Way. We know if we look along the Milky Way, we get about 1 degree more than we get on the going perpendicular direction. So what we like to know is we can't get out of our Milky Way. We like to see what the light is outside. And so people did various experiments to try to see how to get around all this stuff. And what ultimately happened was none of these people I really got a very good measurement of it. So I figured I'm going to try to get the best possible measurement. And what I'm doing is I'm sitting inside this pancake. I'm going to take my antenna and I'm going to look along the plane at the place where the plane looks thinnest, where the fewest fewest stars are, and then measure at several frequencies, because if that is ionized hydrogen, then I understand the frequency behavior of ionized hydrogen, and so I could figure that out. But I got so bad, I never could get rid of the 3 degrees. And I said to him, this got to be an obsession. Couldn't get a 0. So what I ended up doing was seeing what else I could do, looking out at the sky. And so I started counting one galaxy, and the Big Bang was not at that point thought it might even be there. But ultimately, I started looking at various objects in the sky which looked to be outside of our galaxy, and look at their motion. And the interesting thing was that except for a very few local ones, they were all moving away from us. And the faster the motion was, the further away they were. And so there's a very simple story which I tell when I have kids. When there's new school children, talk about a race, a foot race. Suppose you come late to a gym class, and your teacher has started a race. How do you know if the race has been started fairly? And with a little coaching, they can always come up with the answer. You come late to a race. Can anybody tell me how you know if the race has been started fairly? Anybody? Yeah.
The people that are farthest away from you are moving the fastest.
Exactly. But that's what we see in the sky. The faster something is moving, the further away it is. And so the race of the galaxies away from one another is fair. That was the single observation that I made better than anybody. And then, when you started doing that, you could find, as you get closer and closer to the Big Bang, the temperature of these objects goes up. And when you start putting that on a chart, you find that at some point, as the temperature gets, as the speed gets toward the speed of light, the speed goes up essentially almost exponentially. You can't get to all the way to the Big Bang. But you get to the point where you get to 10,000 degrees. Because 10,000 degrees is where hydrogen ionizes. And so from that point on, you can then do the rest of the analysis, and you find in the universe that yes, indeed, the whole thing started in a single place. And the interesting thing about this place, and this is just to stretch your mind a little bit. The interesting thing about this place is you can't ask where it is, because when it started, it was all of space. You can't stand outside of it. There is no outside. It's only this. And start out of nothing. You say, well, where was it? Well, it's everywhere. You start expanding out of nothing. And that was the beginning of the Big Bang. You start having to figure out what those things mean, and then as the temperature gets lower and lower, you start forming certain elements. The first elements forms hydrogen, then you get deuterium, you go a little further, and then you get things carbon, etc. So those are the kinds of things that I was doing. Having said all that, so this is the other point, which is I was skeptical, but I didn't ignore things that some of the other people did. And so then we did have to listen. We did have to listen to other people and other people's conjectures, because listening, remembering that listening is not obeying. So, having said all that, I'm now ready to start talking a little bit about what you get anything from you? Okay, then I will do this. Let's go now, having said all this, let's stop for a couple of minutes since we're looking at engineering stuff. What, if anything, at this point early in the talk, would any of you like to ask me? Yes?
So when you were an undergraduate, what was the most important thing that you think that you did for your career that affected you the most in your life later on?
Good. That's a very good question. Well, I went to, that was an interesting one. I decided I would become an engineer because I was an immigrant to the United States. Most important thing, somebody asked me why did I go to college, and I said because I didn't want to be poor anymore. And so then I went to school, and I figured I'd go to engineering school because I didn't know if I could ever get a fellowship rate. I could go to engineering school, and I could take that, and then I had some GI Bill money coming and such, and I decided I would then start studying. But as soon as I got, actually at that point it was ROTC money, and then I got GI Bill money. But I found that as I looked around, engineering wasn't really what I wanted to do. I really wanted to learn more about the world. And so very quickly I switched to physics. I've never been sorry because it gives me answers. And so I'm prejudiced into saying that a physicist can be an engineer, but it's hard to go the other way around. And so that that is where I started, and I started doing some physics things. And then when I went to, as I said, I went to the Army, came out of the Army, I decided I wanted to go back to graduate school, and then I was in an electrical engineering program, which I think got me into ultimately physics. And my thesis advisor, Charlie Townsend, now lives in the guy who invented the laser and laser and some other stuff, who lives in Berkeley, got me started in, and that mainly is what happened. You have to start someplace, and that was the place I started. Okay, any other questions? Yeah.
What do you think one of the coolest things in physics research right now is?
Coolest things, it's hard, it's, I can't really get very interested in multiple dimensions and all the math that goes with that. I'm sure there's a lot to be done, and it's very hard to do. On the other hand, if you can do it, the point is ultimately all this stuff is made of other stuff, and all has been built up somehow out of the same body, and if someone can put an order to that, that's a wonderful thing. That's on the that would be on the physics side. The other side of physics, for me, which I'm also doing, is the only other thing to me that matters is nuclear fusion, because it's really the only way our species can survive. Because all you have to do is the most depressing picture you can look at. If you want to really depress yourself, get a picture of Hoover Dam tonight. It's bone dry. There's no water left in the entire Colorado River. And we don't have any water. Our species will last for a while, but we are mining our aquifers. And unless somebody can do this with fusion, so then you can melt the polar ice cap and start all over again and actually build desalination plants which don't themselves use fossil fuels. So that, I think, is probably the coolest thing that anybody can do right now, and there are some people doing it. Yeah?
So you explained what about from engineering to physics. What drew you to venture capital as a student?
Oh! That's another interesting one. Yes. What happened was, I went, after I got out of the Army, I went to Bell Labs. I got a job there. And I come with and I said, and I wanted to get a job. I was wearing my Signal Corps uniform. I was a second lieutenant, and I would go with Signal Corps flags. Oh, well, you're in the Signal Corps, you ought to go up to the radiation lab. And that's where I met Professor Towns. And so that's
kind of buffer. It's like going in a stream that you kind of weighing you down, and you kind of ease with it, with the current. Guys aren't very curious, or maybe you are, you're too scared. You think somebody's going to be going to ask a bad question, and other people are going to point afterwards and say, boy, that was pretty silly. How about you? What would you like to know?
Me?
Yeah.
If you were in college today, like at Stanford, what would you study? And do you think you would take the same career path?
I think probably if I were at Stanford, I think the physics department of Stanford is fine. I think getting a PhD in physics from Stanford is a nice thing, and that will get you. And depending on, I think you have to be very careful. The main thing you have to really be careful, be very selective about, is it's like swimming, and you got to go with the current. You better find out, have enough as you get into this to have some aim. You have to aim your life also. And so then you would, there are lots of good people to work for, but you got to find the ones that you do want to work for, and then try to be an assistant or something. You can always grade papers or wash cars or whatever it is that the person wants. And back there. Yes, sir. What would you like? Yeah. You, yeah. Black glasses. This is, you're here, I'm trying to do this as part of the thing, which is, you're here, and you can't, okay, I'll let you go. You have somebody here raising hands. Oh, this lady did first. You had your hand first.
What do you think about God?
Are you serious? I'm really serious.
Yes.
I hope there's a God. Desperately hope there's a God. Because all the pain I see in this world, if there's nothing, when you see human flesh burn from napalm or bombs or all this stuff, all this hate and everything else, holy wars or whatever, is nothing more than chemical reactions to what the world is all about. So I hope there is a God. And I act as if there is. Can't prove it. I'm weak. I think it's a good supposition, and that's the way I go on there. Now over here.
So Bell Labs last century seemed sort of mythical in its kind of
Yeah, what happened?
breadth.
What
What
happened?
happened, and is there such an institution today?
I worked 37 years. I started out there. I'm very glad to have had a Bell Labs job as a captain in the Army. And over the years, got promoted until I ran the whole research organization. And there were always people who did work. There are a lot of reasons why large organizations can work. And they had a system at Bell Labs. And I wonder if I have to quit 15 more minutes. Okay. They had a system at Bell Labs which is really interesting, which is they forced every department to rate their people in order. Then the departments would meet with other departments in the office of the director and then rate all the department people in those, mesh them. And they meshed them until there's only one person at the top. And the interesting thing about that, why that worked was, if you worked with somebody else, the further away you worked, the higher the level at which you got 2 votes was. It's a very subtle thing. Do you understand what I'm saying? No. You have one people. In other words, suppose you are, imagine it's a grade school. You have all the kids in kindergarten. Okay? And so all the kindergarten classes in one school come together and they make a ranking order. And then another school. But and then when the 2 schools come together, they have a higher ranking system. And ultimately, the meshing gets the people at the top to have votes from further away. So the further away your compatriots are, the people people on your side, the higher up you are. It's a very subtle thing, and I could go into more detail, but that was a subtle reason why Bell Labs was so good while they were doing that. And it was a bureaucratic thing, which was just handed there for many years. Later on, they kind of dropped it. But that was really one thing. The other thing was, you could work on almost anything if your boss let you, because there's plenty of money. And then AT&T committed suicide because they decided they would give away the local companies. And at that point, there was no reason for AT&T anymore. They thought they'd make all this money on Yellow Pages, but if you don't have local companies, Yellow Pages doesn't work anymore. So the whole thing kind of fell apart. And I was ready to retire anyway, and I just didn't want to do this anymore. And so I decided to go west. And I quit after 37 years, and I went, found a venture capital firm where I just listened to people's presentations. And I didn't realize at the time that I wasn't still the boss. And so I'd yell at the speakers and ask them questions. Because I wanted to know, I was curious. The other people didn't ask the questions. So afterwards they said, Arno, would you do this just here, and we'll pay you. And that's how I got my present job. 15, 17 or some such thing. And that's what I'm doing now. Yeah.
What are one of the most destructive or counterproductive practices that you think exist in like scientific progress and innovation, whether it's like human nature, derivative, or it has to do with company organization or education?
What are the least? Well, you can't. I'm not very fond of petroleum companies. It's a lot easier to dig holes in the ground and find more of this stuff than it is to conserve it. And so we're running out of, and basically we're running out of water. So I think that's a really bad one. There's a lot of there are very few alternatives, and people aren't paying enough attention to those. So we need to have a higher set of priorities. But punching holes in the earth is a really counterproductive thing to do, and doing this all the time. So I think basically giving away planet's water as we are is very scary. And fortunately, there is one way out there, and one hopes that this will work. I think it will. The nuclear fusion. Yeah.
So yes, question. So you had a career both as a scientist and now as a venture partner, right? So I mean, you've been talking about big challenges that our planet is facing in the future.
Yeah.
How do you think we should structure or incentivize innovation in the future? One obvious extreme is to fund people with companies, and the incentive is financial. The other incentive is you become a scientist and you do research and that kind of stuff. These challenges seem to be too big for one person to tackle, right? You need big teams to kind of go after them.
Yes. It's hard in many cases. The research, the challenging getting the big problems attacked looks too big for a company. But I found that you can start much smaller. Many people can start much smaller than you think, and so people don't have to do the whole job, but there are little bits and pieces, especially in putting resources together, matching what you can do with what is needed, and so it depends. You don't have to do the whole job. I mean, like this networking company, building what we're doing here. When you think about it, if this stuff works, how many people you can take off the road? I mean, look at this ridiculous. I mean, it's more than ridiculous, obscene. The amount of money people spend in a car every day. And we've got to find ways to communicate without that. And that's not made of some humongous thing. People are getting a little closer to it. People are using, I think, very cute ideas, so that all of a sudden people can talk to one another or exchange information in these very large meshes. So information can move from one place to another instead of moving people. And all they're doing is going there therefore the transportation that we're taking. Yeah.
So you talked about finding your aim when you talked about as going through life and going through stream and finding your aim and focusing on that. How did you find your aim? What kind of advice would you give to somebody trying to look for that?
I think you got to cast a wider net, and so look around at things, offer to help people. Everybody, there's almost nobody that doesn't want good help. And you can go almost anywhere. It could be a faculty meeting. It could be a guy who's running a saloon somewhere. And you just go talk to the saloon keeper. And so ask you, so what do you do? I'm in the investment business. Yeah. So how is the investment business? I said, well, you know, it's okay. We just can't get good help anymore. And this guy brings up a big smile, because that's exactly the problem he's got. And he offers me a beer. But that's the point. Can't get good help. Can't, because people, that be good help, to be helpful on any scale, is probably the single thing that we just keep things going and get them promoted. Yeah.
So you've been very successful in what you described to be like bureaucratic Bell Lab, and you've also been very successful in the academia setting. What do you think was the secret to your success? Do you feel that it was like your intelligence, you were smarter than everyone else, or perseverance?
I used to think it was pain endurance. I came to the United States. We lived in a 3-room basement apartment. My father went to work. My mother, and he had a coal furnace, and during the day my mother was there stoking the coal furnace. And then at night when my father came home, he'd take out the coal ashes and do that. And sometimes, and you know, people would take the garbage down, and we'd get the newspapers, from the daily newspaper comments from that. And I didn't think I was poor, but I certainly didn't want to live there for the rest of my life. And I had to get out, just doing more things. Never question that I would go to college. Never question. Yeah, same thing with my brother. 2 kids coming out as refugees out of Nazi Germany. It's a great place. Hope it gets better. There must be more questions, guys. Okay, start with you, and then you, and then how many more can I take?
Could be another 5 minutes or so.
Okay, so let's take 10 questions, and then we'll be done. You're 10, then we'll go back to 9.
Sometimes I feel like to commit to or create the kinds of big changes you're talking about, like creating nuclear fusion or whatever, you need to steep yourself in academia, maybe get yourself a PhD, and like get involved in the problems in that sort of way. Do you think that's necessarily true? Or are there other ways to put yourself in a position to work on those kinds of problems that make an impact, even if you don't
I think in today's world, there are, and I'm thinking of a fusion company that I'm associated with, I would say there are people who have doctorates in engineering. There's some who have only bachelors. They work together, depending on what part of it they get into and how hard they work, how good they are, they all make a contribution. And then there are people who are technicians who have no degrees, but they fix things and figured out stuff that nobody else did. And so it's a mix. I think it can be anywhere along there, and the brighter, the more again, I thought that was a nice test. The more of a nice test you can be, the more places you can find for your skills. It's better, I think, PhDs, if you get the right kind of PhD, can be very skillful. You really got to watch out for your thesis. Okay, 8.
What is the most interesting idea or company that somebody has pitched to you, and why?
Well, probably the most interesting idea, one that came to us a number of years ago, which is still not out of the woods, was a nuclear fusion company. That's a hard thing to do, but it was not done by the people at CERN or anything else. It was done out of the University of Lab. But you know, that would be most interesting. But there are a lot of other interesting ones in different ways. ones I'm seeing even now, I think are quite interesting. Mostly I'm looking at, because of my interest, most of the things I'm looking at are in energy, and so that's the place I look at most. But I found some very interesting companies. They're still coming up. I think nowadays there's an awful lot in consumer things. Go shop online with your friends. And that doesn't include that. There must be something. There probably is something in it. Okay, you had one turn already. Anybody else before I go back to you? Yes.
So what do you think about people that do social media startups or businesses and things that like a lot of Silicon Valley works on, the rest of the United States kind of feels like it's a waste of time. Do you feel like it's a waste of human talent, or?
No. I mean, remember, I don't know who it was. Somebody said that America's disease is loneliness. Right? People in this country are really lonely, and that's supposed to help it. And I have, after some long time of not doing it, I finally decided, okay, I was one of the first owners of a Facebook page, which I've never looked at since. And then I had this list of 50 people who wanted to be on my Facebook page. So I said, okay, and now I'll learn what's going on there. Maybe I'll put some more stuff on. The reason I was on my Facebook page early was there was a guy in Salt Lake City who put up a Facebook page under the name of Arno Penzias. And so he was getting, real scientists who work on his page, and they all thought they were fine. And fortunately, one of the guys at our firm knew the Facebook people, right? Meant that they had known the Facebook people. And so they pulled his site, but I had to put one in his place so nobody else would do it again. And so recently I said, well, it's been there all these years, I might as well look at it. And I'm not, it has a place in the anonymity and loneliness of a country where, we have an awful lot of mobility, physical mobility, and people moving, physical and just other, and just you get into a different crowd, or you're in some kind of organization or whatever, and you kind of move away from people. So kind of bringing people together has a value, very much. It's not something I would want to start, but I'm glad there is one. We are human after all. We need some of those. I'm less interested in shopping, but then I also go shopping sometimes. Yeah, not very often, but I do sometimes. Yeah.
You talked about aiming your life in a particular direction.
Yeah.
So how did you used to plan your life and your career specifically? Like how far ahead, and what sort of goals did you used to set for yourself?
I think it's mostly like skiing, which is go from bump to bump, and you're going to go downhill, and it's more than general, but in fact, you get over these things. And so it's nice to have two kinds of plans. One is you want to get to the bottom, but on the other hand, you have to have a tactical view and a strategic view at the same time. And you can't, and I think you have to balance the two, and that's a difficult thing. And you put your finger on it, which is balancing strategy and tactics is not easy. And that's one. And one of the ways to find this out, to get this, I think this makes great conversation between you and some of your friends here. I mean, all I'm doing is presenting you with problems here today, but I hope some of you will talk to each other on some of this stuff. And much as I hesitate to do this, but I will, which is if you, what we need is some way of, if any of you want to send me an email in the next few days, just make sure the title line, we have to, what should we use for title line so that will answer your again?
Just put the class code, I guess, E40N is the class.
E40N. That's catchy. Okay, so fine. So I'll tell you what. I will endeavor to answer, but only one. I'm not going to go back and forth many times unless correct. But why don't you just something and it says E40N in the subject line, I will try to the extent that I have time, answer you. It'd be a lot easier if I just picked up the phone and called you, but that wouldn't work. That's not going to work. That's not going to give anybody anything. People love to talk and they hate to listen. So it's much better. It's much better to do it that way. Is that a deal? Okay, good. I got a lot of head. Yes. Before you already, you had it one. I'll get back to you in a minute. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Anybody else? Okay, I'm going to get you, and then we'll finish up. Go ahead.
Do you think more money should be spent on space exploration than it is now?
No. I think there's enough. I went down and saw the shuttle, okay. And it's hard. The point, however, is the following. And this didn't come from me. It came from a very famous physicist who came up with this idea. He said, our civilization has been in advancing mode for no more than 2,000 years. 2,000 years ago, we were pretty much in caves. So we've had 2,000 years of advancing. So now, into these 2,000 years, we are where we are. And think of where we would be if we had another 200 years. We have space exploration. Because I can build you a spaceship right now that will work. Remember, our galaxy is, you're not going to get out of our galaxy, but there are 10 billion suns here. Of those, probably 100 million have planets. By the time you get down, there must be at least 1 million who have life-supporting planets. Okay? So we've got 1 million life-supporting planets. What are the odds? And now I can tell you how to build a spaceship. It's really easy. What you do is you put in robots, television sets, and frozen embryos. Because then, whenever this spaceship lands in the right place, finds a habitable planet, lands, and big enough it has enough stuff on it, and it's a big spaceship. Put the spaceship down, get the kids, grow up the kids, grow the kids up. Remember, the kids will have mothers who happen to have, who have brain, have all the other stuff, the electronics pretty good. We'll have moms and dads, mostly moms, of course, but we'll have parents who can raise them. And there'll be plenty of television to watch, Mystery Rogers and all that stuff. So they can start there, and within 10,000 years, they probably can go do it someplace else. Right? So you would think that not many of these have to be good for the galaxy to be full of these things, because they're multiplying all the time. You build these rocket ships, they're not that hard to build. As long as you have a nuclear reactor down there and a place to mine some iron, and you got robots, you can build anything. So the question is, as this scientist said, he said, wait a minute. We are one of 10 billion suns in the Milky Way. Right? I'm going to say there's going to be at least, as we say, at least 1,000 of these, at least. Okay? What are the odds that we are the oldest civilization in this entire galaxy? That's only two possibilities. One is that we are the oldest, which has a vanishingly small probability, or that advanced human high technology civilizations are inherently unstable. And we don't know. That's the other side. We don't know that, in fact, why aren't they here? Well, they're not here, haven't been here, and it just means that maybe advanced civilizations aren't going to ever make it. And so that's why I go to synagogue. 2 more minutes or what? Anybody who hasn't been, has anybody who has not been called upon who wants to say something or ask something? Or are you all ironed out? Yes, sir.
What is the most important challenge facing the American higher education system today?
The American
Higher education system, the university and college systems. What do you think?
Oh. Why do I want to say the dumbing down of the American mind? I think that's probably the single thing is that there is the fight for attention, essentially, has been won by stuff that isn't that interesting. Whereas when there wasn't, so the competition, sure it's the nerds who find, figuring out the first time I figured out how to solve a algebraic equation or whatever, building something. I built the cold load that measured the background radiation. Any one of these things, I don't know how many people, I don't know. I think this is, get a kick out of this, but a lot of the people who might do this now have all these other things to go to. And there is so there is this aim toward pleasure. We have lost what we used to call the Protestant ethic. We used to think, the idea was that you worked hard, you did your best, and somehow God would bless you or something like that, something of this sort, the Protestant ethic. And some people still feel this way, but the numbers keep shrinking. And in my case, it was a lot of refugees come as they do now, as they did when I was. The idea was going to work and doing stuff. I think there is now an influx which comes for different reasons, connected back to home and so forth. I'm not sure that everyone, but there are still people in the older generation, in the new generations who have come here to do something. But it's no longer the same bright light for the rest of the world. And I think that's very sad. And that's not a happy note. It's not a happy note to end. What I'm always saying is it's the size of it's really the size of the challenge that awaits you. Because everyone can make a difference.